before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end.
The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him.
He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet?
Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand."
No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet.
Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me."
Then Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well.
Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean.
When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet.
I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who has sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. It's the word of the Lord.
Oh? There we go. Thank you so much, guys. Alright, so tonight our passage was John 13, and that's what we're digging into. Ken Barlow is a guy, and he washes tunnels for a living. He's not related to me, but I've always remembered him because of his super awesome last name. A couple years ago, he was featured in an article titled, "It Pays to Have a Job No One Wants." When it comes to washing stuff, this guy is as legit as they come. Ken and his team have cleaned the world's largest office building, the Pentagon. And he has also cleaned the building of engraving and printing in Washington, D.C. How many of you can say you've done that? How many of you want to say you've done that? Not too many, I bet. And it's not all high-profile buildings, because most of Ken's time is spent cleaning tunnels across the East Coast. Tunnels that cars travel through. My immediate reaction to this article was, okay, cool. Like, I never realized that was someone's job. But it makes sense, right? Someone's got to do it, but really, how important could it be? Here's why Ken is paid the big bucks to clean tunnels. 1, lots of people are already sketched out to drive through tunnels, and when they're covered in soot, they're even more claustrophobic. As the soot builds up over time, it will fall in clumps onto people's cars. Enough said. People will actually pull over when they're driving through these tunnels and write stuff on the walls of the tunnels, words that must be washed off. So Ken is this guy, and he cleans these tunnels. And there's a chance these tunnels might get cleaned more frequently than my bedroom. We've all heard of jobs like this. The Discovery Channel TV show, Dirty Jobs, is based on people who have jobs that no one wants, and probably didn't even know existed. From a fence post remover to a fish grinder cleaner, termite poop examiner, mattress recycler, olive oil presser, goose down feather plucker, bird banding coordinator, and of course, camel rancher. There's a job for everyone. Why do I tell you this? Because tonight we're looking at John 13, the story where Jesus washes his disciples' feet, and a story where Jesus tells us that we gain prestige and eminence by taking the jobs that nobody wants. That's backwards, right? But in a simple story, Jesus flips things upside down and subverts the paradigm that greatness is achieved by doing great things. Instead, he maps out a surprising path of prestige and shows us that in order to transcend commonness, you have to embrace commonness and acts of self-sacrificial love. In chapters 1 through 12 of John, we see Jesus do a lot of really great Lord and Savior King-like stuff. He walks on water, feeds the 5,000, raises Lazarus from the dead. Jesus is performing miracles and signs for the general public around him, but as soon as we dive into chapter 13, the tone changes. The other gospel accounts let us in on the almost comical backstory of John 13. And while Jesus was zeroing in on the cross, his friends are arguing about who's going to be most important in the kingdom. They're trying to decide which of them would be most suited to greatness versus the commonness of tax collecting and fishmongering. John 13 is an intimate setting between Jesus and his disciples. In verse 1, it says that Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. Jesus had loved the world, so now he's going to leave. This is a polite way of saying Jesus is about to be hung on a cross. He knows he's about to die, so with the time he has left, he's going to break bread with the disciples and show us the secret shortcut to the yellow brick road that leads to success and fame. No, that's actually not what the passage says. It reads that Jesus is showing us the full extent of his love. So when we look at the passage, what do we see? It's a dinner scene. The disciples enter the upper room with Jesus. They probably noticed that no servant is present. But being the good Hebrews that they were, they knew that somebody was going to have to wash their feet. It had probably been a really long day for the disciples. So it's like you've been in the car on a road trip all day with your family, and you finally stop at a restaurant and to sit down and eat. They take you to your table, but you realize there are no menus there. So if you duck your head down and don't make eye contact with anybody, maybe somebody else will go get the menus, and then you can order your food and eat. So the disciples are sitting down, and they've got to be thinking, who's going to do it? Someone has to. Don't make eye contact. So who does it? I know 80% of you in this room have heard this story 100 times. And for the 20% of you who haven't, well, I guess the title of the passage gives it away, but I don't want the gravity of this moment to be lost, de-emphasized, or glossed over. Jesus is the one who gets up to wash their feet. Jesus, their king, gets up to wash their feet. Jesus is the last person the disciples expected to get up, and he takes the job that nobody else wanted. You know those moments when you feel really awkward and embarrassed for someone, but they don't feel embarrassed for themselves? For me, it always happens when I'm in a big lecture hall and somebody raises their hand a lot, and then they talk a lot, and I don't recognize what everyone else in the room seems to get. And it's agonizing watching this person shoot their hand up in the air again and again. My dear friend Pearl has a word for this, and the word is fondo. It's when you feel so embarrassed for someone who doesn't feel embarrassed for themselves. As Jesus gets up, can you see the shock on the disciples' faces? Maybe they have really great poker faces. But as Jesus took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist, the disciples' stomachs are dropping. They have crazy fondo for Jesus. No, not you, they're saying. Kings don't act that way. Kings don't do this. It's downright wrong, and it's embarrassing. Don't you see you're embarrassing yourself? Jesus, as their teacher and Messiah, he is their teacher and Messiah. And the world looks down on them now, but Jesus is supposed to be paving the way to the coming kingdom, and they get to ride his coattails all the way to success. Jesus wins in the end, right? He's the king who conquers all, so why is he acting this way? Doesn't he know who he is? So we see a peculiar illustration of Jesus. He's not acting how he's supposed to, or at least within the framework of how the disciples think he should, how the first century Jewish culture viewed a king should act. And not much has changed today, because our 21st century culture has the same preconceptions of people of prestige. When I look at our society, who do I define as successful? In high school, the cliche of hierarchies is really obvious. It's prom, court, homecoming, king, queen. Just watch 5 minutes of one of the greatest movies ever, Mean Girls, and you learn everything that you've ever needed to know about social hierarchies. But that was so high school, right? We're college students now. We're better than that. But there's still a social elite here in academia. There are those people who seem to be able to do everything, and they are really, really good at like having jobs and internships. And then there's also people who are really, really good at least one thing, right? There's pressure to find your niche. Our culture here at school tells us that those who score high on their tests while balancing a job and a couple internships will rise to the top. Only in Good Will Hunting does the janitor trump the professor. So my question for you tonight is, what end goal are you seeking? If you're seeking to become a professor, then sweet. If you're seeking to find greater meaning in your life and purpose to your everyday activities, then allow Jesus to shake things up. We are promised that not only is there more to this world for us after we die, but there is more to this world for us right now, in this moment, just waiting to be tapped into. So how are we to access these wonders and glories, and how do we overcome and transcend commonness? Jesus shows us this in 3 ways. 1, let the true King wash your feet. 2, identify yourself by the cross. And 3, do like Jesus did. So point 1, let the true King wash your feet. John 13, verses 6 through 8 read, Jesus came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answers, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Peter's response when Jesus gets to him, no, he says, you shall never wash my feet. You see, foot washing is disgusting, grimy work. Peter knows how gross his feet are. He's been walking around all day in sandals, in the dirt, maybe around in the mud. Sometimes clumps of poop are caked on his feet. He could have some strange yellow fungus under his toenails. Only Peter knows. So when Peter looks at Jesus and says, no, you shall never wash my feet, he's not being petty or irrational. He's being really, really objective. His feet are nasty. And it's one thing for a servant to wash them. It's another for his peers to wash him. But it's absolutely inconceivable to Peter for his king and Lord to wash his feet. Peter can't reconcile the idea that a king should or would do this. But Jesus' response tells us that, in fact, Peter needs his feet to be washed by Jesus, or else he's missing out on the whole shebang. Jesus replies in verse 8, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. The word part is actually the Greek word meros. And when used in the Old Testament, it means inheritance and refers to the land that the Lord has promised his people. When used here in the New Testament, it is referring to the new covenant God has made with us. To partake in the joys of the kingdom and to become a part of Jesus' elite inner circle, we must be in relationship with Jesus, and not just that, he actually needs to serve us. Jesus is not threatening Peter to get away. Jesus is revealing to Peter that unless he allows Jesus to serve him, he is simply a bystander watching the scene and not enjoying the benefits of the kingdom today, right now. Jesus is alluding to the cross and showing us that our relationship with him isn't balanced either. It's really asymmetrical. It's all about what Jesus has done. We are created to be in relationship with God, but we are broken and dirty. We cannot somehow wash our own feet. We cannot somehow clean our own hearts, because the distance between us and God is too great. A friend can't do it. Only Christ can do it. Jesus is God made flesh. Jesus is God here with us, and only Jesus as God can bridge the gap between us and God. As Pastor Darrell Johnson puts it, at the cross, God suffers the abandonment so we never do. The cry from the darkness that shook the earth, split the rocks, opened the graves, tore the huge curtain, has become the declaration. It is safe to enter the Holy One's presence. Come, just as you are. Everything that needs to be done has been done. Forsakenness, alienation, abandonment are finished. Come. So today, let the King wash your feet. He's already done it. He suffered abandonment on the cross, so that all we need to do is come to him, come to the Lord, and overcome the separation between us and our Father. When you do, you become a part of his clique. That's it. You're in today, tomorrow, and every day.